Okay, good morning. So we are here today for the Security and Passenger Safety Community Advisory Group meeting, our first meeting of 2023. And so we are starting that meeting right now. It is April 25th at 11:01. Agenda item 1 is roll call. And so here I am going to request that the clerk conduct roll call. And as your name is called, if you could say where you're from so that we can all kind of remember who we're working with, that would be wonderful. Would the clerk like to begin roll call?
Ariana Mondragon,
Here.
Bobby Ray Salas,
I think the direction is that would you please say who you are representing?
sorry.
And then
I'm with Mid-City CAN, and I believe I'm representing the Community Advice Advocacy Group.
Wonderful.
Bobby Ray Salas, Emma Rodriguez,
Hi, I'm here. I'm representing youth and young people. I was recently a UCSD student.
Janelle Chatak, John Brady,
Hi, John Brady with Lived Experience Advisors representing the homeless community.
Karen Howard, Catherine Durant,
Here, I am representing the Regional Task Force on Homelessness as a member.
Manu Agni,
Present, I'm a student at UCSD and also a youth young adult representative.
Matthew Wechter, Megan Welsh,
Hello, I am here and I am an academic with relevant expertise on this topic, and I teach at San Diego State University.
Michelle Carlson,
Hi, I am here and I'm representing on the El Cajon, East County.
Michelle Krug,
Hi, Michelle Krug. I am representing the disability community, and because I'm blind, it's really helpful if people enunciate so that I can kind of get an idea, or if you say your name before you're saying things during the meeting. Thank you.
Rosina Lizaraga, Roderick Coven,
Present, Rod Coven. I am an academic and I work at SDSU.
Todd Temple,
Good
Vic-
morning. I'm present and I represent tourism business. I'm the director of security at the San Diego Community.
Victoria Turner,
Present.
Victoria, would you mind telling us who you represent in the community?
I represent the adult community and seniors.
Thank you.
we have a quorum.
Thank you so much. We will now go to agenda item 2. It looks like public comment. Do we have any public comment?
There are no public comments.
All right, so there is no public comment at this time. So we are going to move on to agenda item number 3, which is approval of the minutes from our last meeting. So this action would approve the minutes from the September 7, 2022 meeting of this group. I request a motion at this time for approval of the minutes that you all have in your packet.
I'll make the motion.
Is there a second to this motion?
Second.
Thank you. Rod Colvin seconds. John Brady makes the motion. Rod Colvin seconds. All members in favor, please say aye.
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 All members opposed to this motion, please say nay. Hearing none, the motion has passed. And now we will go on to starting our discussion items, starting with item number 4. This is an appointment of a new chairperson and vice chairperson for this community advisory group. So during this item, we are going to take nominations from the floor and elect a chair and vice chair for our 2023 work ahead. At this moment, I believe I open the floor for nominations. Is that correct? Michelle, go.
So I would like to nominate John Brady for chair. Are we doing both at the same time or separately?
We can do them at the same time. I'll make notes on who we're nominating.
Okay, I am nominating John Brady for chair and Megan for vice chair.
We have to second these nominations. Yeah. What was the second? John Brady for chair and vice chair?
Megan for vice chair.
Typically, what we'll do is you'll have all the nominations put forward and then take them in the order in which they were made. So if you want to accept any more nominations, if anyone else has an alternative, you're welcome to speak up now. And looks like Dahlia is signaling that somebody else wants to make a motion or
So
nomination.
I have Victoria Turner online. They are writing in the chat, but Victoria, if you could use the raised hand feature to make your nominations. All right, go
And
ahead.
is she on camera?
She is not on camera.
In order to participate in the meeting, she has to be on camera.
So Ms. Turner, if you can turn on your camera and then mute yourself to make your nominations. Looks like we lost audio. Ms. Turner.
I think it would be appropriate to go ahead and, since you have a chair and a vice chair nomination, that this body could vote on that now, and if you'd like to do that. And then if it fails, then we would go to Victoria, and hopefully she'll be back on.
I am here.
Okay. Were you asking to make another nomination?
Yeah. Yes, I would like to nominate Michelle and Ariana.
And Michelle Krug?
Yes,
For chair, is that correct?
correct.
Okay, so we have Michelle Krug nominated,
And Ariana,
and we also have Ariana Mondragon.
correct.
Thank you.
So you would now, unless there's any other nominations?
I believe there might be. Do you have one? Oh, I thought maybe you were gesturing. Okay, wishful thinking. Okay. Any other nominations?
I would like to nominate to keep Megan as chair and John as vice chair.
Thank you. Any other nominations? Okay, hearing none and seeing none.
I was just going to suggest that if either of the candidates would like to say anything, they're welcome to do that now, or we could just take the vote.
I am John Brady here. Thank you for the opportunity. I am happy to accept the nomination for chair. I feel like this committee plays an important role at the San Diego MTS, and it is doing really solid work, and look forward to working with you to set the agenda moving forward in the coming year.
Michelle, would you like to say anything regarding your nomination?
Very much appreciate, thank you. I very much appreciate the nomination, but I actually would be very happy with and honestly, I called both Megan and John to ask if they were interested in running, and Megan had told me she did not want to be chair, which is why I suggested the changing of the position, just to share that information as a point of information. So, but I do appreciate the trust.
Thank you, Michelle. Ariana, would you like to say anything?
Thank you, Victoria, for your nomination. I think at this time, I wouldn't be able to take it on. But I would like to also recommend John and Megan as chair and vice chair.
Thank you. Did I hear someone else trying to speak? Okay. I would also like to thank folks who nominated me for chair. I have really enjoyed serving in this position over the past year. I am facing a very busy year ahead with other obligations. And I also feel like it's important for many folks to take up this really important work and have that experience. So I am going to respectfully decline the nomination for chair, but I would be happy to run again as vice chair to support whoever we elect as our new chair.
Okay, then I suppose we could just take a vote. It's a simple majority. And the nominations are John Brady as chair and Megan Welsh as vice chair. Do you want to do a voice vote, or would you rather have a roll call vote, Chair?
Voice vote sounds simpler, yes?
It is.
Let's do that.
All right. All in favor of Chair John Brady and Vice Chair Megan Welsh, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstaining? And the chair goes to John Brady.
Do you want to trade chairs now, John?
I think we're okay.
think
We're
we're good.
is that- So, thank you. All right, so let's move on to discussion item number 5, which is public safety focus groups, a report by Mark Olson.
I just wanted to tee this up while he's getting in place. This was an important aspect of follow-up on our surveying to try to get people's opinions about our services and what we do here at MTS. We did want to deep dive a little bit into the concerns that were expressed during that surveying with regard to public safety and transit. And so we held these focus groups. It was one focus group of individuals who identify as female, and then one that is individuals who identify as male. And I listened in for all of them, and I'll reserve my statements about any of it, but we did also present this already to the Public Security Committee of the board. They were really pleased to hear some of the nuances that came out of this effort that we did. So with that, here's Mark.
Well, thank you, Chair, and thanks to the group. I appreciate all of you serving in this capacity and hearing our presentation today. And, I also have Judith McCourt with the Red Hill Group, who's going to be presenting the findings. Red Hill is the group that did the initial customer satisfaction survey, and we've been working with them on our every 2-year customer satisfaction surveys. And, the main thing is we want to learn what we're doing well, what our riders like about MTS, but also look at those opportunities for improvement. So it's a great way for us to reflect on what we're doing well and what we need to improve on. Overall satisfaction was really good in the customer satisfaction survey. It was at 92%. Overall, people are very well satisfied with MTS. That's good. But, there are some challenges that we need to overcome. Some of the things that came up with the survey were safety issues, cleanliness, behavior of other passengers, additional late and weekend service. So we certainly find ways to and things to work on as an agency. But one of the questions that we asked at the end, and Judith will talk a little bit more about this, was, what would make the biggest difference in improving the transit experience? And the one thing overwhelmingly that our riders said was more security. And so what we wanted to do, though, is that understand what more security means. It can mean different things to different people, right? So we wanted to dig into that a little bit more and find out what people thought, and particularly our riders who ride frequently, what they thought about more security and what that meant to them. And so Judith conducted those focus groups, like Sharon mentioned, in February, and we'll let her go ahead and get into the results of that. So Judith, are you on right now?
I am on and I have my camera on. So as long as everybody can hear me, I'm ready to go. If we could move, please, to the second slide. Mark alluded to the point that we had done work as part of the customer satisfaction survey to understand what people wanted. And the key things that came out of that were more security, cleanliness of service, behavior of other passengers, and frequency of service. Last year in September, I had the opportunity to present to the same group the findings of the customer satisfaction survey. And this group felt, as did the board, that conducting some focus groups would help us gain additional insight into specifically what customers were saying about safety on board, the behaviors of other passengers, and perceptions around the equity of fare checking on the trolley. So focus groups were suggested by this group, and again supported by the board, to better understand customer sentiment on safety and security. If we could, the specific purpose of these groups, which there were two that were held in February, was to have a group of people who had a variety of rider profiles and to explore topics including trip patterns, overall importance of safety, safety perceptions while waiting for the trolley and bus, safety perceptions while riding, visible security, and perceptions of the behavior of other passengers, as well as fare checking. 16 individuals participated, and as Sharon stated, and we'll see on the next page, that the people were asked to segment themselves by gender preference. Slide 4, please. Actually, the fifth one. I'd like to briefly review the demographics because there was a great diversity in the demographics of people who participated. We had one group that consisted of 9 women and one group that consisted of 7 men. The reason that the groups were segmented is because some of the topics, and you'll understand this or hear this as we go forward, were of a somewhat sensitive nature, and we wanted to make sure that people felt entirely comfortable in discussing their feelings and sentiments. The age groups were very well dispersed. We had persons from 18 to over 65 with a really good representation. We had students and non-students, and we had persons of all ethnicities who participated. In terms of the transit profiles of the group, which is you'll see on the next slide, we had people who were who'd been riding for at least 1 year and 3 years or more. So we had a group of people who understood what the system was about. In terms of rider frequency, again, a very good distribution with people who rode frequently as well as occasional riders. The trip purpose, almost everybody rode the MTS services for work. Many people rode it for leisure and recreation, school, other errands, healthcare. So in other words, what we were seeing was a group of people who used the trolley and the bus to transport themselves and to get around San Diego. People rode the bus and the trolley, and they rode all lines. So moving to the key findings, we will discuss here. We look at the transit trip across a continuum, starting with access to the transit stop, waiting for transit, riding transit, and then egress, which is how you get to your destination. So what we found here, we conducted a series of personal polls throughout the survey to understand people's quick sentiment about what they thought about the importance of different issues. So here we asked people what the importance of safety was when they considered riding transit. Women, I'm going to break out results by gender in some places where it's relevant. Women gave it a 9.6 and men said 9 out of 10, that safety is very important. So personal safety is very high importance for both men and women, and time of day travel and the location are key factors that contribute to the perception of an environment that's safe to travel. However, saying that, we then know that experiencing or observing incidents is a common phenomena for people. So if we look at the next slide, we can see that everyone could recall at least one incident where they were concerned about personal safety. And there were some differences here. For women, these ranged from being concerned about their surroundings, experiencing verbal and sexual harassment, unwanted touching and advances, and being followed. For men, they more often described the situations as observing situations, and that was concerning to them. And these occurred across the entire trip chain. So the question comes up is whether or not people defer trip making, or do they decide not to take a trip because of their concerns about transit? And here gender differences are really important. Most men do not avoid making a trip because of concerns about personal safety. And from time to time here, I'm going to read a quote from that's representative of what people said. So this is what a typical man's quote was: "I never decide not to take public transportation. I always feel safe enough to use MTS." Now let's take the reverse perspective here of women. A typical quote from a woman is, "I have to deal with a lot of homeless and mental health issues on my street and at stations. I have a baby and I won't bring him on public transit because it's too dangerous." Women more often consider time of day, perceived danger associated with location, and the presence of persons who they are concerned about, and also traveling with children. Now we're going to take a look at some of the temporal issues. So we're going to look at what people say about traveling after dark. So here we're everybody uses the system in the day. Everybody in these focus groups, there was 100% usage of MTS in the day. On the weekends, women were more likely to use it than men. This suggests that probably women are more transit dependent than men, where 89% of the women used it and 43% of the men. Daylight hours, again, everyone uses it. However, the usage slips to almost half in non-daylight hours. Now, part of this can be accounted for by people going to work, but also there are some safety concerns. And traveling in non-daylight hours was more of a concern for women than men, but it was a concern for both. People feel less safe. And however, that being said, again, traveling in non-daylight hours is often a necessity regardless of gender, because people have to get to places. So let's look at what men say about this. Safety concerns generally do not deter men from making trips at night. And this is interesting because men are more confident in their ability to address a personal security threat should it arise. They see themselves, and we'll hear this in a quote, as being able to escape, to run, to flee, to get away from it. However, if they're traveling with children, it does increase their concern. And men do perceive that there's an enhanced presence of security compared to a few years ago. Here's what a man said: "I think things are a lot more secure. I feel like I can protect myself. I can run if I have to, but I have 2 toddlers and I think it's kind of risky for them." So if we take a look at it from a woman's perspective, they feel definitely less safe traveling after dark. And for women, however, sometimes they will opt to take a taxi, Uber, or Lyft if they perceive that the danger of making the trip is greater than the economic burden of the transit alternatives. So they weigh cost against safety. However, women say they really would like to use transit after dark so they can take take part in more community events. I'd like to read a quote here. A couple of quotes. I try to get home at least by 6 at night, and I always use public transportation, but that's not always possible. And this next one was from a nurse. And she said, I get held up at the hospital and work late, and then have to do the dreaded ride in the dark and get to the parking garage. I'm looking for people who are following me, people who are standing around watching and not doing anything. So I think these quotes here sort of express the sentiment of how people feel traveling at different times of day. Now let's take a look at traveling, at perceived safety while waiting for transit. Here we start to notice some differences. On a scale of 1 to 10, how personally safe do you feel waiting for the bus or trolley? Women will give that response in the 6 range, where men are much more likely to give that in the 7 out of 10 range. Stop and safety location is important. Women try to avoid locations that they don't perceive as safe, and they look for alternative access egress routes to stops and stations, even if it means more walking more. This was a quote from a woman. There's a guy that is on the corner of where the bus stop is. A few times he's tried to swing at me or hit me. I've been thinking about walking up a little, or maybe Uber to the trolley station. Coming home, I usually get off on the stop before his stop and then take the longer way around. We then asked people, so what makes people feel safe when you're waiting? And if we move to the next slide, we'll see that good lighting and security make people feel safer. So we constructed a word cloud, and the key words that appear in this word cloud are lighting, security, cameras, visibility, and other people. So this is what people see and think of as a safe environment while waiting for transit. And you can see the importance of lighting was overwhelming. But obviously other things matter too. Where you travel also matters. So there are concerns about certain areas of where people travel. Those areas of concern are in what I'm going to describe as somewhat of a triangle that starts up at the Old Town, and it extends over to the Euclid Avenue station, goes down to H Street. And if you think of that as a triangle, that's where there's a higher area of concern about safety. There's also some concern up at the UTC Transit Center after there are no students who are in that environment. So let's move to the next slide, where we asked people about how they perceive safety when riding the trolley. This is interesting because men, regardless of whether they ride the trolley or the bus, give the rating between a 7.6 and a 7.9. Women, when riding the bus, said a 7.5, but when riding the trolley said a 5.3. What's the difference here? And I think we talked about this a little bit in our last meeting, that the presence, or we had the hypothesis, the presence of a coach operator enhanced the feeling of security for all. And that indeed is what people said. Trip time is also a factor for people. So, however, they will, men and women will choose the trolley if the time that they feel exposed is less. So in other words, if the trip time to make a trip on the trolley is, say, 15 minutes, but if it was going to take 40 minutes or 30 minutes on the bus, someone might opt for the trolley, even though they said they personally felt less safe when doing so. So what creates a safe trolley environment? And this involves multiple elements, which is on slide 18. The trolley environment that enhances the feeling of personal safety is the presence of visible transit security, the presence of other riders, seats and environment that is clean and free of debris and bodily fluids, avoiding locations with disruptive riders, persons who are intoxicated, under the influence of drugs, or mentally ill and unstable. Remaining constantly alert. There was a term that frequently came up multiple times in the focus group, which was having your head on a swivel and then having a planned escape route. So let's take a look at other strategies that people use to enhance personal safety. Staying alert is paramount. Avoiding the attraction and attention of others is a safety consideration, particularly for women. They consider what they wear when riding transit and make purposeful choices about shoes, jewelry, backpack, purses, and they try to avoid anything that they think might draw unwanted attention. Men are less likely to consider to limit attire choices, although dressing down was mentioned. So then we took a look at the identification of security. And people say that the identification of security personnel is easy. And primarily security is identifiable by their uniforms and the presence of other gear such as radios that aid with identification. Primarily there are 3 types of people and participants did refer to them by the color of their shirts. The transit ambassadors who they see as wearing red shirts. We did show them photos as well. They're identified as persons who can help with non-security matters. Then there are persons who wear the yellow shirts and the blue shirts, the CCIs wear the yellow and the transit security wear the blues. There wasn't always a clear understanding as to respect for the roles. Interestingly, however, the yellow shirts on the CCI staff are highly visible and to participants conveyed greater authority even in the absence of a weapon. So we did dive a little bit into the perceptions of courtesy and being respectful. This is a typical quote. It's always been a pleasant experience. I've never had issues with security. Watching them with other people, they're very lenient. The majority of participants have a positive impression, but courtesy and respect, this is interesting, are described as being present and interactive, but also having personal interaction, including recognition and showing concern for a person's welfare beyond conducting a fare check. There was an interesting couple of interesting comments that were made. One woman said that she thought it was great that a security officer said, "Watch out here, you might need to hold on because the doors are closing and the trolley's going to start." Just a mention and a physical recognition that the customers were people was important to people. So overall perceptions of security, people like seeing security. They do associate security with ticket checking. Knowing the security is present makes them feel safer. But participants perceive that security doesn't always address situations and enforce policies. And we've added here the way they would, because this is their perception of how they think they would deal with a situation, which is not always the way that perhaps the situation should be dealt with. But there is a difference there with that surfaced. So here is a typical quote from a man and a woman. "The most interaction I've had with security is when I didn't pay my ticket. They're really understanding and they're very lenient. And I have never seen anything escalate past, okay, just pay next time." And this was a man. And a woman said, "I feel a lot safer having security there. I think people are less likely to do something sketchy, even if the police don't intervene, because sometimes that doesn't happen." So moving to the next slide, we asked men and women to say how often they were aware of seeing security, visible security. And there is a difference here. Approximately 3/4 of women say they are not conscious of seeing visible security, where conversely, about 3/4 of men say that they see security at least half the time or more. So there is a difference in perception of how people see if they actually see security. So moving forward, we asked whether or not visible security enhanced the feeling of personal safety. And so we asked people, when riding the trolley or bus, would you like to see more, less, or the same amount of security? And 100% of the people said, men or women, that they wanted to see more security. So we did ask the question, when is security too much? You know, do we have too much security? And people, the feeling around that was it depends on how a situation is handled, and that having the appropriate amount of security for a situation was important, but MTS was nowhere close to having too much security. So that was the consensus of the group. People feel that security is less visible in some areas. And interestingly enough, the areas where they say that security is less visible is also the areas that they are concerned about. So it's that same triangle that it's sort of in that same triangle that we discussed, which again, to remind you, goes from Old Town to H Street and out to Euclid. So if we can move forward, security goes beyond personnel. There is awareness of cameras and at stations and on the trolleys. Next bus arrival signs are seen as security enhancers because people can see when their bus is coming, and that gives them a sense of feeling more comfortable, of knowing what's going to happen. Interestingly, the awareness of the RiderShare number is low. So people were not very aware of this. One person had put the app on their phone. However, it became apparent that they actually thought the app was for ride sharing. So other strategies mentioned included increased service frequency, increased cleanliness. Cleanliness is associated with security, and emergency call buttons throughout the system. So those are things that people think about. If we move forward, we talked a little bit about the frequency of Pronto card tapping. We discussed this in our last meeting in September with this group. And we were trying to find out why people don't tap their Pronto cards. Most people say they tap their Pronto cards most of the time, but not necessarily on all legs of their trips. So we asked why. Tight transit connections and inconvenient validator locations were cited. Concern about locational tracking surfaced for some people. Some people don't understand why the tapping's required. And then most people said, well, the enforcement's just going to be a friendly warning and there really aren't consequences. So here's a typical, I was going to read that typical comment. My commute starts with a bus and I tap it for that bus ride. I don't tap it on the trolley, and then I tap it on the last bus. I definitely don't do it on the trolley because I don't like the way that Pronto actually tracks where you tapped. So if we could go to the next slide. Most people experienced fare checks, and this is pretty similar to men and women. Most of them say they get a fare check at least half the time. The fare checks vary with location and time of day are factors. People think, and this was unanimous, that they're treated with respect and courtesy during the fare check. And they also said that when a fare check occurs, everyone in the area is checked. That is their perception. So what would you do to encourage more people to tap the card? Suggestions that came up included convenient validator locations, more outlets to purchase the Pronto card, consequences beyond a warning, explaining the importance of tapping, dispelling fears about tracking, and expanded community outreach, and finally simplifying the app. So at the end, we had a very interesting discussion about the behavior of other passengers, because if you recall that people's comfort with other passengers has declined substantially in the last actually over the last 3 surveys, customer satisfaction surveys that have been done. So there's an elevated concern about the inappropriate behavior of the passengers. It's behavior and incidents occur in the day and at night. People were generally empathetic and compassionate, and they think it's a societal problem, and they definitely think it's complicated, and they believe that the responsibility to solve belongs to many. However, this is the key for MTS. When riders encounter issues on transit, they create fear generally and discomfort. So this, I think, is a good quote here. It is a shared responsibility, which of course complicates it. The cities, the states, everybody, and of course their families, although families can't always help. It takes everyone to solve such a huge problem, and maybe there's no answer. So that was a little bit discouraging. So what are the specific behaviors that concern people? Cleanliness, personal hygiene of others, cleanliness meaning cleanliness of vehicles and stations, disruptive behavior, open drug use, and fare evasion. I'm going to read one of these 2 quotes here. It's a tough question to be answered. I don't think anyone's looked for MTS to solve any homeless issues, but they can control their own environment. I know it's not simple solution, but increase the frequency of fare checking, making sure everybody who walks on there is using transit system and not just loitering. This goes back to people like having other people around, but they don't like people who are just loitering at stops. That's what creates, is frightening for people, particularly for women. If we move to the next slide, so I'm going to continue on first with the quote from a person here. This is representative. These are representative, both men and women. I don't think MTS will be able to solve the issues on their own, but I think having security personnel when you're at the station and on transit would help. I want to feel safe if I'm using the service because I'm paying for it. So people perceive MTS has policies to address some of the issues like fare evasion, inappropriate behavior, and loitering. Participants want more consistent, what they perceive to be more consistent applications of MTS policies to address some of these issues. And they want more visible security, which is seen as a key driver to the solution. Mark, I'm going to turn it back to you now for next steps.
Yeah, thank you very much, Judith. And it's a lot of information to absorb, and I think we want to have a discussion with this group. We had one with our Public Security Committee as well, but certainly we're open to ideas on what you think we can do to improve and address some of these situations that our rider said. But we are going around and presenting this information to different groups. We have a board of directors presentation on May 18th. Some of the things that we're doing is we're launching a rider etiquette campaign called Respect the Ride, and that's launching very soon within the next couple of weeks. And it just kind of identifies some of the pain points that our riders have experienced that we've gathered through this survey, as well as our customer support team. We also have the social equity listening tour findings, which will address and look at some of these other things like lighting. That's going to be presented to the board on May 18th. And we're also going to, we need to really do some better job educating people on our Ride Assured hotline. I think there's a text option. There's, it's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, texting, also phone calls. That's something that we really need to improve on. Al's team, and we're working with IT to try to combine that into one number and just simplify the process. We're also looking at simplifying the messaging. Maybe Ride Assured isn't the best tagline, and we need to move something that's more direct, like just security hotline. So we're looking at some different options there, but I think we really need to improve that because that's a lifeline for a lot of people. And then MTS is also identifying some ways to enhance their approach to security, and I know Al will talk about that as well. So those are some of the things that we're kind of doing for next steps, and certainly we're open to having a discussion with you and taking some feedback on this as well and answering any questions that you may have.
If I might, we will be happy to share anything that you all discuss here when we do present this to the board of directors. So while we kind of reversed it and went to the Public Security Committee before coming here, It was just a timing issue. We will be happy to provide any of your feedback to that board as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark and Judith, for the report. Clerk, do we have any public comment on this item?
There are no public comments.
All right, well, I will open it up for board committee comments, excuse me. Michelle? There we go. I don't know why it's not open. Here, use mine.
Okay, that was my first suggestion. I have real concerns about how this survey, this focus group was done in terms of, number one, because I asked, if somebody read through the slides for me. So there were 16 people, to me, is not enough to actually get a widespread perspective on what's going on. To my knowledge, nothing was done about saying where these people are from, where they were traveling from, because the map, as it was described to me, tells me very clearly you did not have a East County people. You did not have really South County, San Ysidro people. You had people up through Chula Vista, but everybody I know, including myself, has trepidation at the Iris Station, at the San Ysidro, at in El Cajon, at the Lemon Grove. I know my friend won't let her kids, leave from there alone. She wants to be there when they arrive at the trolley. And these are high schoolers. So so that's a concern that was not more widespread, and that the geography wasn't a part of it. I do know there were no Latino men that were over, I believe, the last two categories for sure, 65 plus, but I believe it was the last two age categories, and there were no Latinas, period, in the survey or in the focus group, which may have been because you didn't offer it in Spanish. I don't know. But I also know that myself as a blind person was never had the opportunity to participate. I was told that how you chose, Judith, these people were based on who had filled out a customer survey that had happened a while ago. Well, that customer survey at that time wasn't offered where somebody had the opportunity to call in like a blind person. And I personally did check with both the Blind Center, the Braille Institute, and the Blind Community Center, but there was no outreach to any of those. You have a lot of blind people using public transportation because we don't have a lot of other options. So the fact that there was no opportunity for other people, it seems like you use the same people. And I'll ask the question, but that was what I was told, was that it was people that had already filled out the survey because they were, clearly willing to participate. But there would have been people like me that would have liked to have given a very different perspective. And again, I don't know how the question was asked about, where do you feel concerns in terms of creating that map? Was it only asked in where you are traveling? Was it asked that, that you occasionally travel somewhere, or maybe it was only within the frequency? But to me, there was a whole lot of gaps, and also the fact that we didn't offer it in Spanish, because in San Diego, I don't think you can do a focus group and not offer it in Spanish. That's it for the moment.
Well, thank you. This is Mark. I appreciate that. And, I certainly agree that, there's always, limitations to research studies whenever you do them. And I think I'll let Judith maybe speak to the research method and the recruitment efforts, if you want to do that, Judith.
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. When we decided to do this last year, the comments were made by persons who had taken the customer satisfaction survey, which were approximately 2,000 people. From those 2,000 people, we had people who said that they would, or they had provided us with email addresses or phone numbers. Some of them had. So we created a group. We sent out invitations to a large number of persons, and then we geographically isolated people so that we had people from North County and from South County. Did we have people from every single place? No. Focus groups are qualitative research. They are, and they do have limitations. They're meant to really take a look at, really to explore in the next step of depth, would say, some of the quantitative findings. In terms of finding out absolutely specifically all locations where there are concerns of safety, I think that that would probably be a different type of methodology that you'd probably have to apply, because everything that's in this group is really qualitative. You can't really apply anything quantitative to Michelle's point. This is really just to learn more about why people feel it, so feel what they're saying. We did have multiracial persons. People were free to say if they were which gender and genders, ethnicities with which they associated. And a focus group will really only work if you have about 8 to 10 people in it, just because they're an hour and a half in length. So they clearly have limitations. And I respect what Michelle's saying. There's probably a lot more work to do in this area that's beyond just the scope of finding out what next we need to do from a focus group. So I'll leave it at that. So Michelle, thank you for your comments.
Yeah, and I think Judith, just to add to that, I mean, I think what we saw is some correlation between the quantitative research that we did with the customer satisfaction survey and then these focus groups, where we saw cleanliness is an issue, lighting's an issue, the treatment of security officers, more security, things like that, where we see these correlation between the two. And I think that's where we can really use the data. But certainly there are limitations, Michelle, and I think you pointed out a few of them.
Michelle, did they answer? I mean, understanding that we can't address all the concerns, but.
I guess they answered it as it is, but I would like to see there be more outreach, because as an example, I never had the opportunity to do the survey because it was on the internet. So, and since I don't use the internet, it was not something, it's automatically leaving out people that don't have internet or who are blind, for whatever their reasons are. That's all. I would like to see it done with more expansiveness.
Thank you. Thank you, Michelle. Emma, I believe you had a comment.
Yeah, I've got a couple of comments and questions. The first one is also for Judith, and it also kind of speaks to Michelle's point. I wanted to know if you tried to control for like how popular certain routes are when you did these maps of area of increased safety concern, and the other one, which is somewhere.
That's a really good question. And with the number of people who participate in a focus group, again, it's qualitative, not quantitative. To apply one person to that area, you cannot use qualitative data to do that. So these are spots where there were multiple mentions.
Yeah, I guess you're right. I guess I would just like to see maybe next to it or kind of in the same context, to give context, some more information on which routes are most popular. Again, to give context, not necessarily, it's always difficult to look at a focus group and because you want to have thousands of people, but you can't. So I understand that difficulty, but it would be nice to have that context.
People we asked people in terms of locations. We did not ask people in terms of this route or that route or that line, because multiple lines, for example, run, as you know, like 12th and Imperial, many things come into that hub, as do the Old Town. So those specific applications are actually beyond this study. That would have to be something that would be done on a quantitative level in a different type of venue. So the purpose of this study was to start to isolate areas where people were saying that they were concerned, but you can't use 16 people to say these are all the areas or that are of concern to people. I mean, it's just not good research methodology.
Okay, I'm seeing that now. Yeah, that
Yeah.
they're the yellow dots are the areas of concern.
We will be doing a customer satisfaction survey again next year. That will have a much larger population, and that may be something that we can control for in that.
Yeah, and right now Sandag on our behalf is doing our onboard survey, which is a much larger effort, and they ask a lot of different questions, but there's so many things that, and then you have to look at surveys as that's a snapshot in time. Perceptions next week could be different, so yeah, it's just, you layer it on. And in my mind, the value to this was, we did get, for instance, we learned that our Ride Assured program, which to me is a really great tool for helping people access safety and help when they need it. Almost no one used it. One person used it, and they really didn't understand what it was either. And that's, we realize we have got to do a better job of communicating it. There's a lot of signs on every one of our vehicles, in every one of our stations, at all our bus stops. And so there's almost too much noise, too much sign noise to really get the message out. So we're working on that. So those are the kinds of things that I think this focus group effort was helpful at. Another one was, a lot of times we think, oh, our ambassador program, which has people out on the platforms, and those are people that are another layer of help for people in instances where they might not feel safe. It came out that no, they don't think of them as people that are going to help them keep safe, because a lot of times they're senior citizens, or they're women like themselves, or they're, and they just don't look at them as an added layer of safety. It's a text and phone call system where it goes straight to our dispatch for our security. And you can, so if you don't feel safe on getting on a phone, you might just text like when an incident is happening on board. And so you can do that, and we'll immediately address whatever is happening, and they can dispatch somebody to your location.
I did actually, I had another comment kind of in that area, which was, never heard of it. It's a sign. That's the thing, right? It's like, if you're blind, you can't see the sign. And I don't have any ideas about that. Yeah. But I did have an idea. I mean, the reason that I've never used it or never like put it in my phone is because it always seems to me like there's like 911, you immediately think of there's proof that it works, right? Even though their response times are actually pretty dismal. So what I would like to see is maybe an extra sign saying the average, transit officer arrives within X minutes when you text this number, just to kind of add some oomph to it. And that was my other comment.
We don't really have a mechanism for tracking response times. We can look into, see how we could do that with a new CAG system that we're looking to purchase, but I use Ride Assured myself very frequently. If I get on board and I see something that doesn't seem appropriate, I'll text where I am, what car number I'm in, and I get a response just almost immediately from our dispatchers saying, thank you for your report, and we'll dispatch people right away. I'm sorry, this is Al Styler from Director of Transit Security. But I use it multiple times. It gives us the ability to attach a picture to it. If I want to show there's a mess on the car that I want to report, I can take a picture and I can send that to the text line, and I'll get a response. Again, thank you. The important things are to remember where you are and what car you're on. Our control center, where our dispatchers are, is right next to the rail control center. So just by giving them a card number, they can look at the board and see exactly where that train is. And we can dispatch our personnel as necessary, or the train might be coming into a station where we already have personnel assigned, and that'll handle the problem.
But I like that idea of communicating the response time.
Yeah.
One of the things it could be is how quickly we can reply to a text, or text messages typically replied to in X amount of minutes or something like that. So that may be something that we can communicate to give some people some extra assurance that we're going to respond.
Yeah, and we're actually in the middle of repurposing our rider assured system, as Mark mentioned earlier, and we'll have a more robust system that will actually be more computerized. Things will pop up on our dispatcher screen, and we'll be able to measure at least our response to the text in that method.
Emma, did we get your questions addressed?
Yeah, I mean, enough that I'll let someone else talk.
Okay, well, all right, Michelle?
Yeah, so a couple of things. Al, a blind person isn't gonna be able to read the numbers. So there needs to be alternatives. And I would like to see at every location, obviously not all of them have that. They do have them on the buses, though. There is audio. And at every location, that phone number should be blasted. So that, number one, I think it might make someone that has some tawdry ideas think twice about it. And number two, obviously, someone like me would be able to, oh, there's a phone number that I can call if I'm feeling concerned, because I had no idea about that. And obviously, I am invested in MTS and in safety. So I would like to see there be much more alternatives. I don't know how many stations have the audio, but that I've always been pushing for more audio, because that gives me an idea, especially when I'm at a station that has the blue line and the orange line, as to, which one is coming next. Because I'm always asking people, and they, maybe I don't ask the people that speak English, or maybe and I do switch back and forth to English and Spanish, but I just don't always get an answer from people. Okay.
Any other members of the committee?
Yeah, if you don't mind, Todd Temple, so Director of
Thanks, Todd.
Security at the Convention Center. I actually just wanted to give a different perspective from what I'm hearing. So I have 30 years of law enforcement. I know there's a few of you in the room that have that. And you went from a customer satisfaction survey, and then you dwindled it down to a focus group of 16, which is actually quite large. And obviously, if we did a focus group of just the East County, you might get different answers versus downtown and versus the South Bay. But the focus group and the questions was quite extensive in length and time. And I think oddly enough, the results of what people think a safe environment is really consistent from what I've seen in 30 years and then what I do at the convention center. So I think you're spot on the survey. And then, now it's about that posture and what you need to improve on. Cleanliness is so important to safety. That's just not on the ride itself, but the surrounding areas, the restrooms. People do equate cleanliness, graffiti, and you got trash. That's an insecure environment, right? Lighting is right, very important. You need well-lit areas for people to feel safe. I can tell you, working terrorism and counterterrorism historically in my career, and those in this room know this, your number one deterrent from having bad actors do things that are stupid is visibility of your security team. That doesn't mean necessarily more security, right? Resources. It's how you utilize those resources, where you place those resources, and to ensure that they're visible to the riders. So I personally, what I see is good, in the direction that you're going is terrific. And the results of that focus group is really important to get to where you need to go. So I think you guys are definitely on the right track, and continue doing what you're doing. Thank you.
Were there any disabled people in your focus group?
Let me unmute myself. Yes, Michelle, there were.
So that would have been, how many, or what was?
We did
their-
not ask persons if they had a disability. What happened is people self-revealed during the group.
And was there anyone in a wheelchair?
I did not ask the question if there was anyone in a wheelchair. We did not specifically ask. If you asked me to hypothesize, I would say no.
No, I
But there
just
were
asked,
persons with disabilities.
could you see them? I didn't, I assumed this was in person.
No, we did this on Zooms to allow everybody the opportunity to participate, and so that they did not have to travel beyond, a comfortable location for them.
Thank you.
All the participants had to be on camera, though.
Yes.
during the focus group.
I have a
Rosina?
question. Yeah,
Yes.
thank you. This is Rosina. Couple of questions in regards to demographic and the travel characteristics. It says here that it's 2 students, but on the other travel characteristic is 15 they go to school. So the 9 don't go to school. So my concern is this following. So if they go to 2 are students and 9 are going to school, so I don't know how far or what type of level of grade levels are. I don't know if it's middle schoolers, high schoolers, college students. So I'll just need to find out if you got that information.
Good question. People had to be at least 18 to participate, and that's just because of a focus group and for requirements, unless you're doing it actually at a school. People who had student status, my thought is here that they interpreted it as a full-time student status. And some people mentioned that they had used it for school. They weren't currently necessarily using it for school, or they were going to some sort of school, but they didn't consider themselves a full-time student. So I think that's a really good observation of how people say they're using it and what they're doing.
Yeah, thank you. And some other topic that catch my attention regards this. No one in the group said that it was coming from Tijuana, Mexico here to the transportation here in the United States from the border crossing. And how the behavior would take that, because for me,
Yes.
I'm surprised that nobody says that bathroom accessibility is now was under a consideration. Especially people, because you have ages from 35 up to 65. So no one showed that concern.
They also had no Latina.
So let me see if I can, it's muffling a little on my end. So let me see if I can repeat, understand your question. Because your question was that no one mentioned restroom facilities?
Yes. Or
Okay.
accessibility or facilitation for that.
All right.
amenity.
We didn't ask specifically about restroom facilities. The specific focus of this was concern about safety issues. So people were not asked, do you, about a restroom facility as part of that. That was not part of this particular research of the focus group.
And may I ask, what was the reason why? Because if I got right from San Isidro to La Jolla or to Poway, that's a safety concern too. I don't know if that was my question, if no one showed that type of concern.
It didn't surface. We asked people about we asked people about stations, we asked people about waiting for the bus, we asked people about riding, but nothing surfaced specifically about restrooms. Interestingly, when we did, I think, Mark, the very first slide that we have, which is the one, is it the first slide?
Personal safety is
The
important.
word, it's the word cloud. Even when we asked people to tell us, and this was a little bit of a surprise to me, actually, because I had expected that restrooms would appear as perhaps what would make the biggest difference in improving your transit experience. And when this survey was done, it was done on board, and there were 3 options for people with 2,000 people. There were or approximately 2,000, and people had multiple ways to participate. They could participate by phone, they could be personally interviewed, or they could participate on a tablet survey. There were also announcements made on MTS buses that the survey was being conducted, and so that we could reach a large number of people and a diverse number of people. Bathrooms and came up or restrooms very infrequently in comparison with other items. And you can see, well, it actually appears on the word cloud, but it is a small concern relative to the other concerns that people have. That doesn't mean it isn't a concern, but when they were saying what would make the biggest difference, security, cleanliness, frequency, though, and passenger behavior were the biggest items. And those are the items at the September 7th meeting that this group decided to look at, not more frequency, but the other items, the non-service related items.
All right, thank you so much. And one last thing. Any of the older population of your survey people never mentioned like courtesy messaging to the people who's actually were using the trolley or the bus? I don't know, there's always messaging there that, use it, or if you see somebody standing, it's a woman or pregnant woman or elder or disabled, there were messages there, but not as effective. Not all the people see those signs. And I interviewed her, but she said the safety is not, as a courtesy concern from other riders. And she said, that's a concern for me. And she was more than 69 years old. Does anybody show that type of concern?
No, that did not come up. People were more concerned about traveling with children. That there now, however, when you talk about the customer satisfaction survey, shelters and seating did come up. Again, on the word cloud, those are a much smaller proportion as to things that can make the biggest difference. In order to, do and figure out something, say, specifically for persons who are older, a focus group with persons who are older to understand their issues would inform us more about that. This was a general look, sort of the next step, if you will, at what safety, cleanliness, and passenger behavior meant. Those were the three focuses, or the three foci, that were decided to be addressed in this particular series of 2 focus groups.
That's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosina. Ariana, and then we'll get to you, Rob, if that's all right.
Thank you, John.
If you don't mind, draw the microphone down so that everyone, thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, this is Ariana. I use she, her pronouns. So at Mid-City Can, we have a momentum team made of different community members where we get together at least once a month. And we actually had a conversation around public transit, like what folks were experiencing. We've been also participating in the social equity listening tour sessions. And some of the things that we always talk about are like the cleanliness. So how often are stations being cleaned, bus stops being cleaned, frequency, like bus frequencies. I feel like when you have more buses showing up either every 10 minutes to 15, there is a sense of security because you're not just waiting there for 30 minutes, right? Or for a late bus. And then lighting and shading. So we're hitting I think last week it was super hot. Shading is also a safety issue. And that's something that I don't think I really saw here, but we did see lighting. I think some of the things that I wonder, what are the challenges for MTS with providing the shading and the lighting? I think oftentimes we hear that it is a cost issue, an operations issue. So I'm just wondering if we could hear more about that. Because for the next steps, we saw the social equity fund. the concern that I have is that it's only like 3 million, so it's not like something that I see really like sustainable, like lighting costs money, shading costs money. So like what are some of the challenges that MTS is having? And I guess what are ways that we can support as community members? You know, I think those are some of the things that I would like to learn more about, because that's often like a frequent concern that is brought up by community members.
So Ariana mentioned the social equity listening tour. That's another effort we've done to try to outreach to our customers and try to find out where we need to invest more in and in which communities. So some of the things that have come out of that is we've put together a list. We assigned in one year's capital improvement program 3 million, and then we assigned another 2 million. So the effort would be, or the goal would be, to address some of these concerns from the communities that we're serving to see where we need to invest a little bit more into customers' safety and customer feelings of comfort and things like that. So that's a whole separate effort that's going to be coming to our board as well in May, I think it is, or maybe it's June, anyway.
May.
But one of the projects that came out of that is enhancing lighting at stops. How can we better light our transit network so that people feel safe in that environment? Another one is where can we add more and better shelters, more accessible bus stops, for instance, that kind of thing. And so that's another project that's going to be proposed as part of that as well. So that, I guess I'm just emphasizing there's multi-layers of what we're learning and what we need to do to address what our customers need and what they are asking for. So this particular focus group is set around the idea of how could we kind of tease out that word cloud security. You know, when people said that that's their biggest concern, how do we tease that out? What does that mean? You know, because people's perception of security may differ. As you know, you ask 1,000 people, it'll be 1,000 different ways. So.
Yep, and above and beyond the social equity listening tour, we also have a capital improvement program, and in the program that was approved by the board just recently, it had additional shelters to be included throughout our system. So our planning department is working on a mapping and effort to locate the best spots where we can actually put these, what's most feasible, and studying that. And so we're looking at expanding the entire program, you know, with shelters, which offer shade. That's the big thing in San Diego, right? And lighting as well. So I think that will help. So we are working on that effort. And I think, you know, once we can get that into place, it's how do you maintain it? And one of the ways that we do that is by generating revenue through advertising kiosks that are there. And so if we're able to generate revenue, that'll pay for the actual shelter to maintain it and keep it looking good and cleaning it, and having a crew come out there and maintain it. So it's kind of a cycle that we have, and we're looking forward to expanding the entire shelter program in the next 5 years. You know, that'll happen gradually as we find more locations.
Thank you. Another comment that I did have for the texting and the call, I think that it does need to be changed because it's not very direct. I have my mom, she rides transit every day, and she rides it from La Jolla down to Southeast San Diego at Euclid and Trolley. So that triangle that we're seeing on the map, like that is her experience every day. And I didn't even know that, and she didn't know that. Maybe it might be helpful for the folks that are working there to provide cards to kind of just share that that's something that is available for folks as a reference. Because they're always having a sign, like it's not very visible, or just people are just tired, and they just want to sit back down. I was gonna say something else, but I kind of lost my train of thought. But thank you for your response.
Thank you, Ariana. And if you have that thought, just raise your hand again. Roderick.
Thanks for recognizing me. So I just have a sort of, well, two questions, if you'll indulge me. First, one of the things that with security that I often think about are increased ridership. And I was wondering if I didn't see it here specifically, but I'm wondering if it was teased out or if it came up in any other formats in terms of what more ridership might do to increase the perception of safety, which of course to me connects to, you know, different programs that we might think about that could get more people on public transportation. I will confess, I enjoy seeing kids get on the bus and hop on and hop off. And so, you know, obviously I wasn't part of this, but if I were, that would have come up for me, the issue of ridership. And then secondly, I'll just put both questions out there. Definitely asking for a friend who is less religious about the pronto tapping. So I'm wondering, just for the record, if you could talk a little bit about why that's important. And then also if there's been any conversation about adding some additional ones or putting them, I didn't see that as a next step, but maybe placing them more frequently, either in the trolleys themselves or more conveniently located on the station.
Judith, do you want to talk briefly about, you know, the perception of having more people traveling? You mentioned that, I think it was in one of the later slides. When more people are on board, people feel more comfortable, but don't necessarily want people to see people loitering.
Yes, I will. The perception of people who I'm going to say are doing what people perceive, which is the same thing as they are, which is traveling from A to B and making a journey in a way that gets them from A to B, as long as there are a number of people on board, that does make them feel safer. What doesn't make people safe is if a group of people get on who, or even one or two people get on who appear not to have the same intent of what they perceive as the same intent for traveling. So there were comments made that people have seen open drug use, or people get on with a purposeful, with what they perceive as the intent of being disruptive. So that is where security comes in, or where their strategy of what I'm going to call hop on, hop off on the trolley. They'll hop off one car and onto another car, or hop off and wait for the next trolley to come. So there is that concern of, if people are doing like things that I am on transit, then I feel safe. That's sort of a convoluted answer, but I hope that gets
Right.
to
And I
the
think if
point.
they're feeling safe, they're more likely to ride, or might ride.
Yes.
Or ride, you know, maybe if they feel safe, they're more likely to ride at night. If they need to ride at night, just expand the hours that they're willing to use the service. And then that in turn, you know, obviously I think safety is a big issue for, you know, your riders who maybe aren't dependent on transit, right? You know, that can, you know, have that choice or that ability to ride if they want, or if they don't feel safe, they're going to get in their car and go. So having that safety element, if they do feel safe, you know, can get those choice riders to ride more frequently as well.
This is elegant. And part of what we heard too during the focus group is the trip to the station was considered part of their transportation experience. So if they walked through a neighborhood where they didn't feel safe, or there was somebody, one woman was on the corner near where the bus, that she considered that part of her transit experience. So we tried to keep that in mind while we were listening to some of the comments.
Did we cover?
With regard to the validators and the pronto system, so the reason that we have to have people tap is because the system doesn't, you don't necessarily have to buy a pass. What we allow for is that you just tap your card and it deducts the amount of your trip, the cash from your card. So in other words, it's like a debit card that you're using on our system. So if you don't tap, we don't get our fare, which means that you really are essentially fare evading. So what we want is to get as many people to tap as possible. But the incentive is not to tap because you don't want to have to pay your fare. So that's where you get that quandary. We recognize that there's not enough validators, so we are putting more validators. We're checking where they are. The big thing that's going to change very shortly, I think in May, is that the ticket vending machine will become a validator. So that's the big box that you see under every shelter on all the trolley platforms. And so people can tap on that, and that's very recognizable. You can see that on the station platforms. We don't have that fare evasion we don't have the lack of tapping on buses. That's not the problem. It's only at the trolley. So we're hopeful that that one change will significantly reduce that fare evasion. Dahlia is indicating that I believe that there's somebody online that wants to speak.
We've got two.
Victoria Turner has their hand raised. Victoria, please unmute yourself now.
Hi, thank you for doing this survey. For the next survey, it would be nice if you would consult the security CAG so we could suggest questions that are important to us. In summary, your survey seems to show that there's increased discomfort with respect to safety on all of the transportation, not only riding on the bus and the trolley, but also in the stations as well. We concur. We would like to know what the cost of this survey was and if there are plans to do this again every year to compare the similar results.
So the cost of the focus groups was approximately 25,000.
Mm-hmm.
And I appreciate I think that's something that when we do these in the future, this group is certainly one that, we can gather some input on, when we create the questions and different threads of questioning. I think this group can provide some input in the future. So I appreciate that recommendation.
Thank you. And additionally, if there were other ways that potential survey clients could be reached rather than whatever process you used up until now, perhaps if it had been publicized on the internet or other, on bulletin boards around the stations or on the buses and trolleys so that people who wanted to give input were able to do so, that might provide additional data that was not available. For example, Michelle, as a blind person, even if she was not on this committee, would have liked to have given input. So there's a large database of people willing to give you this information, but they're unaware of how best to do that.
Thank you, Victoria. Did you have any other thoughts before we move on to the next committee member?
I would like to address the Ride Assured text program. I have in fact used it a number of times. I was not aware that we could also upload photographs. When you are letting people know about that in the future, that might be something important for folks to know. Can you also upload video?
It works right now as like a standard telephone texting. So if you can send a video from your phone, you can send it to that text line right now.
That's great to know. So when we utilize it as a member of the community and you send a response, perhaps that might be an interesting or efficient option to let the reporter know that that is available to them if they wish to add information to their original report.
Thank you.
Sounds like a great suggestion. Thank you, Victoria. Manu, and then we'll get to Megan, and I believe you have one other comment as well. Okay.
Thank you. This is Manu. I have two questions, I think likely for Al, about the Ride Assured program. So I use it pretty frequently, which is great, but I wanted to know if there was a guideline or if you have an internal recommendation for when somebody should, call or text Ride Assured versus call the police versus like if you're in a trolley, press the button to talk to the operator, or if they're kind of, the same result.
Yeah, so if it's an emergency situation where, there's a chance of, being harmed, I
Right.
would, call 911 right away if you need a police response. If it's something where you're just feeling uncomfortable, you know, you see a behavior in there that's making you uncomfortable, that's not an immediate danger, you can send that on rider short, and then our dispatcher can decide if it's at our level that we can handle or if we need law enforcement response.
And then what about pressing, thank you, and what about the button to
Oh,
talk,
yeah,
speak to the
the bus,
operator in the
I
trolley?
guess that would be like the middle step, you know, if you want something addressed right away, that button will go right to the cab where the operator is. And they will, once that's depressed, the speaker will go on, they'll be able to hear anything that's going on in the vehicle that you're on. And then they have contact with our control center also, and they can advise us of what's going on.
Thank you. And then a second, so at the stations, there are some of the stations have speakers or loud, you know, like announcements. Can security from the dispatcher control center, can they like make announcements or talk over the
There is, I
stations?
believe that there are, our dispatch can't, but I think our train operators can make announcements from the control center to those stations.
Okay, thank you.
Wait, let's make sure. Brian, does central control have the capability of making an announcement at the station?
Of the rail division. Okay. Once again, my name is Brian Riley. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of the Rail Division here at MTS. That was a great question on how to communicate with the rail operators. That emergency button that's on board the vehicle, you can speak directly to the operator. The operator can relay information directly to the OCC and get the Operations Control Center. So the OCC is our control center for the rail division. Inside of the OCC, you have controllers there, dispatchers that are for the rail division, and you also have the security team there. So they can communicate directly to law enforcement or whoever's necessary as far as emergency response, if emergency response is necessary. The other question that you had was, do we have the ability or capacity to communicate to the stations? Yes, we do. We have PA systems that are in the OCC, which is the Operation Control Center, where we can communicate or we can make announcements inside of the stations.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, it was actually brought up by the Public Security Committee of the board. Well, could we broadcast a message that said, you're on camera, be aware, that kind of thing? The challenge is we're in an urban environment, and every time we make an announcement, it's heard by a lot of people who are living and working right there. So, you know, you want to offset the impacts that you have to the communities we're moving through too. So.
Understood. Did we get to all your, thank you, Megan.
Thank you. Thank you to Mark and Judith for this informative presentation and for sitting in the hot seats while we ask you all the questions. And I'm going to keep asking questions. While we have this slide up, this is great for my first question. I would just like to confirm and clarify, Judith and Mark, you did not specifically ask a question in your research about restroom access and how people feel about it. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So we should not infer that restroom access isn't a concern among transit riders. It's more that it wasn't addressed in this research topic.
It was not addressed in this research topic. It was addressed. It was only alluded to as open comments in the larger customer satisfaction survey, which is what this cloud represents. And the focus entirely of this particular focus group was security, passenger behavior, and pronto fare tapping.
Wonderful. Thank you for that clarification. So I just want to emphasize that we should not assume that our transit riders are not concerned about restroom access when they're using transit, just that it was not addressed in this research project. So related, I would like to request, and we can talk about this later, but at some point this year, I would like our community advisory group to take up restroom access as a topic. And I would like for us to explore it and discuss it. And I will share that my research team at San Diego State is doing research on public restroom access, and specifically restroom access adjacent to our transit lines. Do you want to respond to that or should I keep?
No,
going?
I just want to make sure that that's within the purview of this group, but other than that, I think it's a really great point that access to bathrooms is important to many members of the community. I also recognizing that, you know, we have this issue across the city. Michelle, did you have a comment?
I have
before-
more questions. I have more
sure.
questions.
Yeah.
Thank you, John. I was real excited to hear about the social equity listening tour that's happening. This is the first time I've heard about it. And it sounds like something that would be important for our group to keep up to speed on. So I am wondering if there will be an opportunity in the future, once the listening tour has concluded or at whatever appropriate point in your process, MTS, can we hear what happened during that listening tour, what was learned as relevant to our safety and security focus here on this group? So I see Sharon nodding yes to that. Okay, and then I just have a couple more specific questions about the research that was done here. I would love for us to look at slides 21 and 22 just real quick. So thank you again to Mark and Judith for sharing this research with us. I was curious on slide 21. This is the slide that shares the research finding from the focus groups that security personnel are perceived as courteous and respectful. It does not appear to me, unless I missed it, that this part of the analysis didn't parse out people's perceptions of whether they were CCIs or TSOs or ambassadors. Is it all lumped together here? Mark, is that correct to
Yeah, they
assume?
didn't really break it
Yeah.
out.
They did not. I would say based on their perception that they knew the difference between ambassadors and security,
Uh-huh.
then they would know that difference. So it's basically the blue shirts and the yellow shirts.
Okay. Did you feel like you got findings that you could speak to about how people perceive the yellow shirts versus the blue shirts, or would that be something that we would want to look at in a future study?
They seem to notice the yellow shirts more. It wasn't a question that was exactly asked. It was more, oh yeah, well, we see the yellow ones. And one of our challenges is the blue shirts are, I mean, they are recognized as safety personnel, but they also sometimes wear a jacket, which is not in blue, and it could be perceived as somebody that's just traveling on transit to get to their security job somewhere else, you know, so that's, Al and I have been talking about this.
Yeah, and part of the reason we didn't specifically ask was we wanted to get an opinion if they felt like yellow was more important than the blue. So we could go, as we're planning on, what do we do next with our team? Do we hire more CCIs? Do we increase our contract security forces? We wanted, instead of kind of giving them an answer, we would rather them give it to us. But there's another slide that asks about inspections, and, you know, being everybody, both our yellow shirts and our blue shirt people can do inspections, but only our yellow shirt officers have the authority to actually enforce.
Great, thank you. And my last question is on the next slide, slide 22. I really appreciated the consistent breakout of gender identity differences in terms of how we're experiencing safety on transit. This slide, though, in particular, really got me thinking about other identity differences and how people might perceive security differently. And here I'm thinking not just about gender, but also age and race ethnicity. I know that because of the small sample size and the way that focus groups are conducted, that, you know, us sitting here and asking Mark and Judith about the identities of the people whose quotes we're seeing here that doesn't fly from a research standpoint because we have to respect research participants' privacy. However, I would really like to see more effort around understanding perceptions of security based on people's identities, because the quotes that I see here from the research that I've done in our community around perceptions of security do not feel representative of our whole community. And I think that that's kind of maybe the concern that Michelle is getting at with some of her comments, and Rosina, I kind of heard it in some of what you're saying. And so I really appreciated Victoria's recommendation that as other research happens here at MTS, we on the community advisory group would really love to be a resource at the beginning of research so that we can help think through some of these holes that we're identifying here, which as a researcher, I will say there are always holes in research. You always miss stuff. And you're always kicking yourself at the end for missing all the things, right? And we're never gonna eliminate that completely, but we have a new resource, which is us, right? To maybe help guide and inform what that research could look like in the future. I guess I didn't have a question in that. It was more of an extended comment, and now I'm done. Thank you, John.
If I can just respond a second there to Megan, I really appreciate your input because I know you're a researcher, and that's great because it's wonderful to have that kind of feedback. We'll tell you that the quote that we have here that's from the man is from a person of color. I recall that because I was sensitive during the facilitation to try to tease out if there was a difference in perceptions between persons of color and not. And in this instance, and of course, this limited sample, it's just a small number of people that participate in a focus group because that's what they are. There was no particular difference with persons of color of people who participated in this particular focus group. So there was one woman who had some concerns, but they were not concerns that were based on race. It was just her concerns about security in just security, but it wasn't anything that changes the results that we're presenting here today. So I just did want to tell you that, and for obvious reasons, we did not identify beyond man and woman for these particular quotes, but in this instance, it was their representative.
Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you. In the interest, are there, Michelle has one more comment, and I think in the interest of time, we'll move from this agenda item, if that's all right.
I want to applaud Megan's suggestion that we be used as a resource. I really appreciate that. And I wanted to make a comment about Judith's usage of gender preference. So people I don't see myself as having a choice in what I see as my gender. And I would just appreciate sensitivity to that. It's not a preference. They used to say that about LGBT people also, that it's a preference. It's not. In terms of the colors of the uniforms, I don't know if ambassadors have a specific color. I wasn't clear on the yellow and the blue. So maybe someone could quickly clarify that for me. And if ambassadors also have a color, that might also be helpful in terms of them being seen, as more having some kind of authority or at least linkage. And the last very quick comment to Sharon's comments about why people have a concern about tapping. And I want to be able to be a good ambassador out in the community about it. I have heard people fearful that if they tap more than once, that they'll be charged more than once. I do understand how Pronto works myself, but that part of that education, that is something I have heard, that they feel that if they, and I didn't go into specifics with bus, trolley, but the bus, you have no choice. You have to tap. But that I could see people being concerned about then doing it again on the trolley and then doing it again. So I just, in addition to the location thing, but I just wanted to share that maybe there's a way of, and then we only have a 2-hour window, I believe, for the transfers. So that might also be just a concern. But if you could also quickly go over the colors, that would help me.
Sure. So the code compliance inspectors, those are MTS employees. They have the ability to cite passengers or people for code violations. And there's an ordinance that MTS has to follow, and also some public utilities code authority as well. So
And they're in what color?
they're in yellow. They don't carry guns.
Okay.
But they're, in general, they're the only ones that can cite. Then we have a contracted security force, which is our intercon contract, where we have the folks in the light blue shirt.
Okay.
I think their pants are black. Maybe they're like
Yeah, like
navy blue.
dark navy, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And those people have, it says on the back, on their back in big letters, transit security. And then we have what we call passenger support personnel, which are also MTS employees. They are people who we deploy in the system to help our customers navigate the system. So they would have information about what fares to buy and how to get on the board the trolley. They would be helping us figure out if there's like a spill at a station. They might let us know so that we can send somebody out, that kind of thing. So passengers.
What color do they wear?
They're wearing red. And they more recently got new uniforms. So some components are black, but for the most part, they're
So red and
red.
black.
Yeah.
And the bottom line is maybe because I know we're on a push for time. Jackets, maybe that if the jackets are a potential making it more confusing, maybe they should have jackets of that same color or a stripe or something, but something that would help identify if they, because of course they need jackets if they're outside. So maybe that would be a helpful.
Yeah,
way
I mean,
to-
it's also that this is an unusually cold, wet year for San Diego. So we don't know for sure if it's in part that they're just all wearing more jackets and more,
But maybe the jackets
clothing.
make sense to me if that should be part of their uniform. That's all. That's the end of my comments.
Thanks, Michelle. So I just had a couple of quick comments. I really heard a couple of things. I think that we do need to do a focus group that's done in Spanish, and perhaps look into doing focus groups specifically for folks with disabilities and seniors, because I feel like those are groups that may have differing opinions about security on our system. And a group that has been potentially excluded because of the language barrier. I also had another quick question systems wide. Is there any, because I know the Pronto app tracks location, is there any ability to upgrade that app so that somebody could push that they have a concern and maybe indicate what the concern is and therefore their location and is already identified?
Yeah, we are trying with our IT department with this new solution that we're having for RiderShare to be able to tie that in. It's just whether I'm not a scientist, definitely an IT guy, but to make sure that the two programs are compatible, that it can be used in the Pronto system. It might be a different way of collecting or using data that might not be transferable. So we're trying to work on a solution with that.
Correct. And then as a final note, I also want to echo the concerns of the word cloud being utilized, because I have heard this at the MTS board, the fact that people did not raise the issue of bathroom access in that word cloud as a reason to accept potentially that we don't need to provide additional bathrooms along the transit line. So with that, unless there are any other comments, can we move on to agenda item 6, shared mobility devices?
Good afternoon, everyone. Again, it's Al Styler, Director of Transit Security and Passenger Safety. And again, it's nice to see everyone again, and thank you for the opportunity to present this. Just kind of wanted to share this with you because this kind of just got dropped on our radar, and we want to let you know what we have coming up. But we were approached by the city of San Diego requesting assistance from our security department to help the 4 main shared mobility device companies in the area. That's Bird, Link, Lyman, Spin, to assist them with the well-coordinated and large-scale thefts that they are experiencing throughout the San Diego area. They report to us that these shared mobility devices, the scooters, are being tampered with and then transported through our system and down into Mexico, where they are refitted, repurposed, and then sold down there by these individuals. With that being said, if we were to take on this responsibility, some potential training requirements that we had that before we get started, we'd have to work closely with the SMD companies to provide us with updated images on all of the devices that are in operation. And as they come up with new ones, to let us know about that. Provide us training on how to identify specifically which are belong by them, where serial numbers may be located, that we can make those identifications. And they can provide us with an up-to-date database showing us any stolen or missing devices so that we'd be able to identify them quickly when we encounter somebody with them. Some procedures that would have to go into effect before we could even start. First of all, need to be an ordinance created by MTS that would give us the authority to ban anybody from having a device on our system, either a trolley or a bus. We'll have to post signage to make our customers aware that they'd no longer be allowed to use the devices on our system. And then we'd like to make announcements at our stations and on board that, effective whatever, they'll no longer be authorized on our system. We're just going through these right now. Quickly, we're trying to develop procedures to deal with this. But what we're looking at is, once we identify somebody with this a device, confirm the patron that it is a rental, not a personal device, and then advise them of the new ordinance. If the patron complies, allow them to leave the system, and they'll be allowed to leave the system and then depart. They're no longer in violation once they get off our system. They're not in violation of our policy anymore. They're off the system. Then if the person refuses to board, our CCI could issue a violation issue a citation for a violation of our new rule and regulation. This is an example of one of the signs we would develop to post in and around our system, put them on trolley cars so people would be aware of it. We've tried to also identify some potential consequences that could come from enforcement. We could encounter some non-compliant patrons, which could result in more use of force by our CCIs, and particularly the people that are trying to steal them and get them down to the border would be more likely to confront and possibly assault some of our CCIs. It might be a problem where some shared mobility devices are similar to personally owned ones. That could involve increased complaints, and then also the disparity. Oh, yours can stay and yours can't. Yours is rented, yours isn't, yours can stay. Somebody with a bicycle, a bicycle takes up a lot more space than does a scooter. And, we'd be the arbiter there to say, no, yours isn't allowed because we have a violation for that. It's an ordinance. We'd have to make sure that we get the up-to-date databases. If one's reported missing or stolen and then it gets recovered and we're not notified about it, we could be dealing with somebody that is perfectly okay to have the scooter, but now we're taking some kind of enforcement action on them. And then finally, who actually is going to be the victim if we do find that we have a stolen scooter. So it would take a lot of joint details from other entities. Will we have law enforcement support us on this? Will they assist the details? Will the scooter companies be there to assist us with this. Do any other cities, counties within this area, are they supporting the SMD companies with this? Are they going to come and pick up all the scooters that are left at our trolley stations, which again, if they're piled up at our station, gives that perception that things are not tidy and unsafe. And finally, there's a cost to putting details together to try to combat this, and who will be paying for that funding. And just real quick, couple examples of the devices. So that was, a quick presentation, but I'd love to hear your comments and concerns about this. Again, it just got put on our radar recently, and we're trying to follow up on how we handle this problem.
Thank you, Mr. Styler. I think we have a couple of comments. Just a reminder, we only have 4 minutes left. So Emma?
Yeah, Emma, this is Emma. I'll try to be quick. So I have a lot of concerns about this. Personally, I think it's probably not worth our time. Maybe as someone who's been run over by these scooters, I'm biased, but maybe not. A lot of my concerns arise because a lot of international students at UCSD use these scooters as their last mile device because UCSD is too hilly to really walk around easily. And so I'm worried that they're coming to this country and suddenly they're like assaulted by someone speaking a different language and doing something that they're confused about. And they already don't like our transit system because it's not very good. No offense to us. So I'd like at least signage in multiple languages if we do this, and just kind of sensitivity to that issue.
Any other comments from the committee? Go ahead.
Yeah, I have some comments. This feels like an unfunded mandate on you, Director Styler, and your team to do more work when we just spent 2 hours talking about how MTS has limited resources and very real safety and security concerns on our system. And I understand that theft is bad, but my brain starts with, where are these companies on theft prevention devices, and how is this becoming another thing that another problem that MTS is asked to solve without funding or support? It also seems like a counterintuitive step to take to pass another ordinance to maybe make this be another enforcement activity when we are trying to meet and missing our climate goals. And as Emma just pointed out, the first mile, last mile piece of our commutes in hilly terrains might call for devices such as these scooters. So my concern is that this is going to be a counterproductive effort with other goals we're trying to achieve. And I see this as a drain on your team's valuable time and resources.
Thank you, Megan. Roderick?
I'll just be brief in the interest of time. I would recommend asking for, from the some additional data that shows that MTS is part of the system of transporting these vehicles. I'm not convinced that it's with MTS. I mean, imagine throwing a bunch of them in the trucks. Friend of mine, not me. But if we're not involved or data, then yes, part of transport, then maybe we don't have to go.
Michelle?
It was just, I guess I'm confused because I thought the whole point of a shared scooter, obviously I don't use one, is that they go from that last mile, first mile, and they pick it up outside of the transit and go to where they need to go to, and then vice versa. And I don't understand why they would be, or if they would be charged, from the scooter company for the miles that they're taking it when they get off at some other place on the trolley. It's not computing why they would be taking it on. I mean, I understand about the theft, but like why else would they take it on
Yeah,
a trolley except for some other?
Let me give you a quick example. So you're in the dorms at UCSD, you rent it there, you take it to the trolley station, and then, no, then
No.
you get on the trolley and you go to Nobel and you go see a movie. Because oftentimes there aren't scooters at each station and it's just very inconvenient to have to rent one and then, unrent it and then, yeah.
You can actually turn it off though while you're on board the trolley and then turn it back on. So I actually have in my phone a picture of a woman who did her shopping, got on the trolley downtown and with one of these mobility devices and then went 3 stations and got off and used it to go wherever she was headed. So it is something that people use as a first mile, last mile.
Any other comments from the committee? I have to agree. It seems like, unless there's going to be some compensation for your security force doing work to recover mobility devices, I don't understand why we would get involved. And it seems like it would impair legitimate usages. I use them the same way. So, before I had a vehicle and I totally get getting on the trolley and taking it with you and then getting off and reactivating it and utilizing to finish that last mile. So.
Can I ask what the next steps are on this? And would it be helpful at any point for our CAG to vote
It
in
would,
support or opposition? Would that help y'all?
so we, our Public Security Committee heard this. I apologize again, it's just a timing issue, last meeting. And they directed us to draft some language. They were not 100% there either. So if this group wanted to take an advisory, this is informational only, but if you all wanted to do an advisory vote to say, hey, here's our sentiment about this, then we could convey that at the next Public Security Committee.
How does everyone feel? Shall we take a vote then? Well, I need a motion, right?
I motion for, you do.
I motion to do an advisory vote.
I second.
And the vote would be to affirm our position that we should not be, that the MTS should not be engaging in regulating mobility devices. Is that correct?
Yes.
All those in favor say aye.
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 All those who abstain, any nays? So
We might have a.
one nay?
Yeah.
The way you worded.
I'm sorry, excuse me.
No, I think the way you worded it is a little bit confusing. Because on the agenda item is in the affirmative, but your question was in the negative.
I see. So
It's hard being chair.
it is hard being chair, and pardon me, it's my first stint. So in an attempt to reword that, we will say, so the motion is to advise the MTS to not enforce mobility device possession on the MTS system. Does that sound correct? Okay, and all those in favor say aye. All those against? And any
Nay.
abstains? Yeah, go ahead. Nay, okay. And Todd, did you say nay?
With just a comment though, is Al brought it up, but I haven't heard Al's opinion of the idea from the mayor to implement the plan and whether that is something MTS feels they can support.
I don't think he can.
Yeah.
It's already been bumped to the board level. So as staff, we have to follow the policies set by the board. So, but you all don't have to.
Yeah, we have. It's out there.
So 2 nays? Two nays.
Well, and I feel like you have to understand where the city is coming from. And UCSD, by the way, is also interested in us helping to regulate this. And that is that they have photos of people with 7 and 8 devices, taking them on the trolley down to the border. When their companies, people get down there and then try to stop them from moving them, they're basically faced with threats and just basically, no, get out of my, and they take them. And they become repurposed and used down south of the border, and they can't get them back because they have been able to hack the system and they're usable in Mexico. So,
This sounds like a business problem, though.
and that's where our committee was going. And they also expressed the concern that our folks are intending to keep our passengers safe as they travel on our system, not to necessarily keep the business from, having trouble. But that having been said, if we see multiples on board now, we've instructed our security people to say, no, you can't have multiples because that's a safety issue.
It becomes a safety issue. They're blocking aisles. People can't move in and out freely. That's.
They can't control those things. If the train gets thrown, if the train gets stopped and they get thrown, they're not going to be able to control more than one. So that to me is a safety concern.
I mean, that sounds like a much more reasonable policy to have overall,
Yeah.
for sure.
All right, well, I think that would conclude our comment on this item. I now open up the agenda to any other issues that the advisory board would like to bring forth at this
If I
point in
could just
time.
raise for a little business, you all have a pronto card in front of you. That's so if you want to, it has 3 day passes on it. You're welcome to use those to come and go for these meetings.
Thank you.
Just wanted to pass that along.
It's, I'll,
And I think we've
Find it.
registered them in each of your names. Yes. So it's actually now going forward, you can use it as your pronto card for other reasons too.
oh, wonderful, thank you. Michelle?
So I had a very challenging.
Go, I'm sorry, Dahlia?
Sorry, can Michelle use the mic?
Yes.
Sorry.
Sorry. Just, I'm not doing well at turning it on and off properly. I had a very challenging time with the security downstairs, and which I did talk to Al, but I understand it's a contracted security company. Megan also had some challenges with it. I didn't speak to anyone else, but I'm wondering if we can't get, I know for the county of San Diego, I chair the Persons with Disabilities board committee, and we're able to get like a pass, for lack of a better word, a badge, to be able to not have to go through the security. And so I'm just wondering if that might be something that we could do with MTS.
We'll look into that. We frequently allow contractors to have a temporary one, so we could probably get that. Well, I'll work offline with Karen and Dahlia over that.
That would be great.
Thank you. Any other items that would like to be put forth by committee members? All right, I believe our next meeting will be on July 18th, 2023 at 1 o'clock. I will reach out to each of you beforehand as the agenda starts to come together in case you have items that you'd like to put forth. And with that, at 2:10 or 1:10 p.m., we'll adjourn the meeting of the Public Safety and Security Committee of the MTS. Thank you very much.
Thank you.